Hello folks, and welcome to the OceanState Cuisine, where in today's video, I'm going to be making an all-in-one pot roast dinner. Now, I know that this is very popular in this day and age, especially when it comes to using a crock pot. But in today's video, I'm going to be using the old-fashioned traditional pan or pot. So first, let's go over some of the ingredients I'm going to be using for today's recipe. So in the front is the star of the show, which is the pot roast. Now normally I use chuck roast. They call it the poor man's prime rib because it's got like a nice amount of fat running through it and it comes out really moist and tender. But today I figured I'd switch it up a bit, so I am using a roast here that's a chuck roast, but it's the shoulder pot. And this pot tends to be a little more dry and it doesn't have much fat at all. It's similar to like top round, bottom round, roast along that nature. And then next we got some carrots, some whole carrots behind the roast. Then next to that I got some potatoes, an onion, and this is elephant garlic. See that garlic that's actually green looking? That's only one clove of elephant garlic. Elephant garlic is huge. A little more about that a little bit later. And then next to the elephant garlic, I got myself some tomato paste. And then for seasonings in the back, I got some basil, some Cajun seasoning, some salt, and some pepper. Now, there's going to be other things that I'm probably going to be using throughout the course of today's video. We'll cover that as I'm doing it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is heat up the pot that I'm going to be using on about a medium to a medium-high heat. We want to get this pot pretty hot. And I'm using a stainless steel pot here. So because it's non-stick and all the above, of course I'm going to have to use some oil. Now in the meantime, while this is heating up, we're going to start working on the vegetables. So first I took the potatoes and I'm just going to cut them up into sections. So they're not going to be finely diced, nothing like that. They're going to be pretty nice sized chunks. And I do keep the skin on because I think it adds flavor plus nutrition. And yes, I did rinse off the potatoes first and gave them a good wash. So we pretty much know how this goes. Then we're going to set the potatoes aside, and next is going to be the onion. Now, the onion is also going to be very easy to prepare for this because we're just going to take out the outside skin, or whatever you want to call it, the peel. And then I'm just going to slice these into 4 segments. So again, they don't have to be finely diced, nothing like that. Okay, now after a few minutes, we're going to go back to the pot. Now we're going to give our attention to the pot and we're going to start browning up the meat. So first I'm going to add a little bit of oil here, enough to coat the bottom of the pot. Again, you don't want to add the oil at the very start of heating up the pot because it can scorch. And then once the oil heats up, it takes about a minute or so, we're now going to add the meat to the pan. And you want to hear this nice sizzle sound when you do so. Okay, that's music to our ears. So while the meat's doing its thing and browning, we're going to go back and finish the vegetables. So we're going to want the meat to cook right now for a good couple of minutes. Okay, now next is the garlic. Now let's talk a little bit about elephant garlic. We're going to see in this image right here how much bigger elephant garlic is compared to normal garlic. And no, I did not buy this in the market. My neighbor actually planted this in the garden and they gave me some. Now this is a little bit different when it comes to preparing the garlic. This does not where you could just smash it with a knife and just dice it up that way. You can't do that with elephant garlic. It does have the paper on the outside or the peel, but once that's removed you see like this green skin. So basically all you have to do with this is just slice it up with a knife. I'm not sure how this would work in a garlic press, but if it would even fit. I'm sure if you cut the sections down, then yes. So I'm just slicing mine up as we see here because they don't have to be small slices because they're going into the pot. Alright, now next is the carrots, and I'm using regular whole carrots here. And I did rinse them off, and then next I'm going to peel them. Just to remove that outside debris and kind of a skin. I find that these kind of peelers right here work the best. They kind of look like a slingshot. And we could see that that's taking that outer skin off with ease. And then after we do this, I'm just going to cut the carrots up again in chunks, just like everything else we've been doing. Really easy. Alright, now back to the pot with the roast in it. We're going to get ready to give this a flip. Now I did cover it with my splatter screen because this could make a heck of a mess. So we could see once I flip this that it's got a nice color to it. It's got that nice char that I'm looking for. So now we're just going to brown the other side, leave it this way, and now comes the fun part. We're now going to start making a meal out of this by adding the vegetables, the seasonings, and all the above. But now I am going to do this a little different than like the last roast that I showed in a video. And the way that I normally make meats like this. I didn't have any beer on hand, which is very rare in my case. And I also didn't have any beef broth. So I came up with another great idea that's going to compensate for this. For this to work, I'm going to have to remove the meat from the pot. But before that, I'm going to add some salt and pepper to this now. When I cook, I don't like to cook in just plain water. There's a science behind it actually when it comes to cooking, which one of these days I'm going to try to cover in a video all by itself. So once this is done browning, I am going to remove the roast just like we see here. And I remove the pot from the burner because I don't want it too hot for the next step. And I am not draining any of those liquids from the pot. I want to keep those in there. Now yes, we still see some splatter on the stove. That was before I ended up using the splatter screen. Alright, so what I'm going to use here next to compensate for not having any alcohol on hand or beef broth is the package mix that you use to make brown gravy. I did happen to have a couple of these packets on hand and I figured, hey, this will work. But the idea is that we don't want to make it thick like actual gravy. We just want to make a broth out of this. So first what we want to do is add a little bit of water to this pot now on about a medium heat. And then slowly start to add in some of this powdered mix for the brown gravy. And then whisking it as you're adding it. Because I don't want a thick gravy at this moment, I'm just going to use a half of a packet. Again, this is just so I'm not using plain water, because everything else that I'm going to be adding to this is also going to add to that broth. The garlic, the onion, it's going to be good. So I'm only going to add enough water to the pot here where it only goes up about halfway of the roast. The main reason why we're using the water here is because it's going to add great flavor and moisture as everything cooks. It's even going to help steam those vegetables and make it where you don't have to worry about scorching anything. So we're going to give everything a good whisk, and now we're going to add back the roast. Just like that. And now we're going to start building this meal. We're going to start adding the vegetables and everything else. The great thing about making meals like this is that once you put it together, you just let it simmer, and it's pretty much, that's all you have to do. So now first I'm going to line the top of the meat now with some of this garlic. And then with the rest of the garlic, I want to put it in the broth around the meat. And then next, we're going to sprinkle some basil, some dried basil all over this. If you have the fresh leaf basil, even better. So I want to put some of this on top of the meat and also around the sides. And this is actually the first time in a roast I'm using Cajun seasoning because I got some on hand, so I figured why not? This stuff's pretty good. We're gonna add a dash of this to everything. And what I like about this Cajun seasoning is that it doesn't have any sodium added to it. As far as I know, it doesn't taste like it anyway. And then next, I'm gonna add the onion. Now with the onion, what I do with this is that I just put, remember I cut them in 4 sections? I put 1 section on each side of the roast in the broth. And as that's cooking and steaming, they're gonna automatically separate. But then what I do is that I peel apart the segments and I lay some on top of the meat. Now let me ask you something. Can you imagine how good your kitchen is smelling right now cooking this? Wait till you taste it. And then we're just gonna add a little bit of salt and then some black pepper. Don't add too much salt at this point because we're still going to be adding some salt to this later on after we add the vegetables. Okay, now over here I'm adding some tomato paste. Now, I like to add something that's got an acid base whenever I make something like this. Beef stews, roasts, all the above. Plus the acids help break down any toughness when it comes to meat. But now what I should have done was add this before I added the meat back to the broth. That would have been a lot easier, but this still works out really well. And because I like using the tubes, you know, I'm just gonna put some all around that broth. And then with my little whisk here, I'm just gonna blend everything together. Easy peasy, sweet and easy. Man, that was corny. Okay, now it's time to add everything else now to the pot. So in goes the potatoes. And I'm just gonna line this around the meat right in that broth. And depending on how many people you cook it for, this is just for me, but I like to have it for a few days. You know, roast is really good too to add to sandwiches later on. But anyways, just add as many potatoes or carrots or whatever that you need. Plus leftover potatoes from a meal like this makes excellent home fries. And then in goes the carrots. Something else that's really good in this, especially for the gravy later on, is some mushrooms. So I am just gonna spread those carrots around. And then I'm just gonna dust everything again with a little bit of salt and pepper. Just so you know, because I know you've seen me add salt to this dish like 5 times. This did not come out salty whatsoever. As a matter of fact, on the potatoes, I had to add some on my plate. When you're cooking, you gotta feel it. And that's basically it. The work's all done, guys. The rest now is up to your stove. So we're gonna cover this and we're gonna knock it way down on a low heat. Now, you have a couple of options here. I did add the vegetables at the very start, but you could add them about halfway through cooking the roast. I cooked my roast about 3 hours. Because we know cooking vegetables that long will make them too soft. But we're gonna see a little bit later what I did to compensate for that, and this dinner came out fantastic. Alright, so after about 10 to 15 minutes, I just wanted to check to see how the simmer was going, and this is perfect. And this is while it's covered. So again, with the cover on, I'm just gonna let it keep going, and we're gonna check it in about another hour and a half. It's always good to like peek in on it and just see how that simmer's going. You don't want it too low and you don't want it too high. But in another hour and a half, I want to check the vegetables. And also the meat, just to get an idea, but I know that the meat's not going to be done yet. So using a fork here, those potatoes are done. And then I'm also going to check a carrot. And those carrots are perfectly done right now. The fork slid right in. And now I'm going to stick the meat with a fork, and I want to check out how tender that is right now. And yes, that still has a ways to go. So now next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the vegetables now from this. Now, again, it would be a lot more easier if you just added the vegetables during like the last hour and a half. Alright, so, let me see. There's a dog outside across the street that never stops barking. He's driving me nuts. Give me a second, guys. Shut up, you squid! You friggin' pelican! Alright, sorry about that, guys. Of course, that didn't help. Okay, so I removed all the vegetables from the pan and I put them on a platter that's oven safe. So I'm going to cover that with some aluminum foil. And then my oven, I'm going to turn it on 350. Once it heats up, I'm going to shut it off and I'm going to stick the vegetables covered right in the oven. Okay, so the meat's starting to get there. It doesn't need that much longer, but I'm still going to go about another 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, about an hour's passed now and we could see that the meat is perfectly tender. This is done. You could see it pulling apart with just a fork. And it doesn't hurt to give it a little bit of a taste. And that's what I'm looking for. Now I removed the roast from the pan and now I want to finish off my gravy. It's time to thicken it up. But I decided on using something that I wasn't planning on using originally. I had some in the refrigerator and I wanted to use it up, and I'm going to be using cream of mushroom. So yes, I won't be using the rest of the actual powder mix. So I'm going to turn the burner up a little bit. I want to take this back up to a simmer and start adding the cream of mushroom to it. And this gravy right here, I wanted to leave the pieces of onion and all that right inside the gravy, so I didn't drain it through a sifter. So the cream of mushroom is going to do two things. It's going to help thicken the sauce, plus it's going to add flavor. So once this heats up a little more, I'm just going to keep whisking it until it blends in well. And then I'm going to cut back on the heat and let it simmer until it gets a little bit thicker. And of course, I want to simmer this uncovered. Okay, now next I'm going to add a little bit of gravy master to this, just to give it more of a deeper, richer tone. And just continue to whisk it and let it simmer so that it thickens up. And I guess I didn't capture it on video, but I also added a little pat of butter to this and blended that in. It gives it a nice richness. Okay, so now I removed the vegetables from the oven that I had turned off, and I also added the meat now to the platter. And kept this covered while I was making my gravy. So let's give it a look. You can see that roast is just pulling apart and it tastes great. Now, chuck roast is not that easy to slice, so a lot of times I just pull apart chunks with a fork and I serve it that way. So let's plate it up and give it a final look. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that works. There we have it, folks. There's a complete pot roast dinner done in all one pot. Serve this with a nice hot dinner roll with some butter on it. So I want to thank you folks so much for stopping by and checking out the OceanState Cuisine. I hope you enjoy this and try it at home. And until the next time, you folks have yourself a fantastic day. Oh, but don't forget to sub up, ring that bell notification, and also leave a comment because we love to hear from you. Take care. Bye-bye.